Hello, this is Barbara Field, and welcome to the Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. The goal of this channel is to just create a place where people can talk about all kinds of different grief, what they're experiencing, what it's been like for them, to just sort of share wisdom and strength with one another and just make it okay for other people who are listening to know that all the ways that you can grieve are exactly the way you need to grieve. And so I will invite each one of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the person that they're thinking about as we begin this panel. And so, Jason, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Jason. I live here in Sacramento. And the person I'm most thinking of for this panel is my father. He passed when I was 19, though it gets a little more convoluted because he was the one out of 6 or 7 funerals for family members I attended within a 5-year window in that period of my life. But he was the top one. So there was a lot of not dealing with the emotions of all those deaths because there were just so many happening back to back.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about your dad and what was going on with him.
Well, he had a hereditary disease called alpha-1. It's incredibly rare. It can attack your liver and or lungs. With him, it was his lungs. So specifically, it would slowly deteriorate his lung capacity. So there was this period of 10 to 15 years where he would have to get weekly injections. A part of regular life was an in-home nurse coming in and doing a series of medical injections and with IV bag and everything. So that became normal for a long time.
Wow.
Then, oh, sorry. No, okay. He was put on the transplant list, and it was 2001, the winter of 2001, right before New Year's into 2002, he got cold. Some lungs came up. And so he went to Stanford Medical Center. That's where they were going to do the operation. And the operation itself was a success in terms of being able to transplant both new lungs into his body. However, for whatever reason, they were never really quite sure of, the lungs never started working. They were never rejected. It never got to the point of rejection. They never kicked in. So it was a couple days of all the family in the hospital waiting room, ups and downs of, is he going to make it? Is he not going to make it? They had to go back in and his heart stopped. All these drugs to the point of he was so bloated you couldn't even recognize him anymore. And so it was about two days of that back and forth, and then he finally they couldn't get everything going, and he passed there in the hospital in Stanford.
That was hard. Okay, Sara, welcome. And what would you like us to know about you and the person or people that you're grieving?
I'm Sara. So I lost my mom in 2009, and she was 38 and I was 18. But I've had a lot of losses recently, but the main person that I am having a hard time with is my dad. He passed away October 31st of 2023. And I haven't been able to process it because everything kind of happened so fast. Basically, he was fine, and then he started being in pain like 3 days before he passed away, and it came to find out that he had an abdominal aneurysm, and it started leaking, and he was put on hospice October 30th, and we found him the next morning at his house, and so haven't been able to process it.
Yeah, that's really hard. When you think it's going to get better now, and instead it gets worse. Okay, Lawrence.
I first met you, Barbara, roughly about a little over a decade ago. But it was that encounter that I was searching for a new career, and it was one that involved counseling. And I had a daughter that was in addiction. So it kind of worked hand in hand to help me better understand the process of healing. And I think that's what's so amazing about I had the opportunity to work with you for 10 years. And actually, other than the closure of the agency, it was a lasting experience. I think it prepared me for where I am today. I lost my sister, my big sister, just a few months ago when she had been diagnosed with an illness that we have been not only preparing her for, it was diabetes, and also ourselves. So just to understand the transition, but all the help that was available. And maybe that's what has me excited about what's going on here now with your project is just the availability of people to be able to get the help that's needed. It's encouraging you to really want to reach out more and just make myself available. Uh, it, I have found that when we help others, it really helps us help ourselves. So
Great.
just, I'm great to be part of this. Glad to be a part of this. Thank you.
So, which one of your parents did you want to talk about? Originally,
Uh,
when we started this, we were talking about parent grief. So which one of your parents' grief processes is most fresh for you?
well, it would be my mother. She had such an impression on all of us. I see it. I have two brothers and a sister. So for us to continually to bond together, just in memory of her, and then also to kind of put in perspective how we want to move forward from here. She was a very strong person. So, of course, the loss you never can let go of. And I think that's what helps us be able to better help others, that they can actually see that we're processing that at the same time.
So as you worked through the grief with your mom, getting all the way through the pain and out to the light at the end of the tunnel, you're finding that helps you to work with others better.
Yes. And then it's interesting how we become more dependent on each other, especially brothers and sisters. And it helps actually, we bond a little closer. And I'm grateful to have that opportunity because we get to kind of bounce off of each other just where we're at, and really helps us stay grounded. Just a reminder of the love.
Cool. Okay, so Sara wanted us to talk about what I think is a really, really important topic. A lot of times when someone dies, we have anger for various reasons, whether we're angry about something that happened, or we're angry that they died, or that they didn't try harder to stay alive, or that we didn't do enough. And it feels very funky to try to do anger and grief at the same time, because ultimately they lost their life. And it can feel very selfish to say, yeah, but what about me? But they're dead. Yeah. But that's the thing. Their process is over. The work is over for them. And we're left here to put all the pieces back together and deal with our regrets and our questions and our anger. And so I'd really like us each to talk about whether you were able to notice the things that you were a little bit angry about or a lot angry about, And so, Sarah, you wanted us to talk about the anger of not feeling like you did enough to save your dad. So say more about that.
Um, I guess I have anger over like feeling like I didn't try hard enough to save him, because with everything that happened the day that we found him, um, when I called 911, they wanted us to do CPR on my dad. And at that point, I couldn't go in the house. So my husband, he was the one that did the CPR until the paramedics arrived. So I have had anger over that situation, feeling like I should have been the one to try CPR because I knew how to do it. Even though I know, like in my head, that because of what he passed away from, like nobody could have saved him. He was going to go anyway. So it's just the anger over that, feeling like I didn't try hard enough to help him.
Yeah, and that is one of the most common things in grief is those woulda, coulda, shouldas. If I had known this, if I had done this, if I had tried this, and those are our way of trying. Like if we can rewrite the story, then they won't be dead. So every year, between the date that my husband had his heart attack and the date that he finally died, I go into this weird kind of suspense, like I'm waiting to see if he'll really be dead this time. And my brain starts all of that. Well, if I had done this, if I had done this, if I had, and every year, like, seriously, whoever you are, can we not do that this year? But there's just like 19 days of maybe he won't be dead this time if, and it's kind of a little crazy making for me. But so I go to therapy every year during that time, try to get that voice turned down a little bit. So Jason, how about you? What was the angry parts for you? Even if it wasn't rageful, if it was just that intense regret.
Yeah, that's it's harder to imagine in the moment when it first happened, because the way I was at the time when it happened, I shut down. Um, when he passed and everyone was in the hospital and we were there in the room and saying our goodbyes, I was stone. Nothing came out. And I existed like that for at least a few months before I actually allowed myself to cry for the first time about the entire situation. So in the moment, I think I felt more anger at just little moments in the situation, being in that waiting room for 2 days with the ups and downs of, is he going to make it? Is he not? There was nothing I could do in that situation. So it wasn't so much anger at me, I'm not doing enough, it just anger at little things people were saying that I knew weren't going to help, and like everyone just be quiet and leave me alone type of thing, and just let me exist in whatever this fugue state is until it is decided. So it was more anger at the situation for me for a long time. It wasn't until years later, and that comes to closer to the point I wanted to talk about later, but more anger at myself in not reaching out to the people around me more. Like I had my sister, my mother at the time, we were all broken. And we stayed that way. We didn't grieve together, but that we can talk more on that later. But yeah, there was more anger in not realizing at the time how we should have done it.
Okay, that's great. So then, Lawrence, what were the little bits of frustration involved in your mom's death?
It was reestablishing a new routine. I always had the habit of calling her in the morning and just kind of I won't checking in on her, see how she was doing. And you just had that relationship for so long that even still, a thought had come to my mind to this day. And I'll just reflect, like, oh, I'll just call her to get an answer about a question that may come up about a relative or something, and you're trying to think of the connection. And it's funny how it really proves to be that time does heal, because then you'll get out of. But I never took her phone number out. I still have all the memories. Sometimes just the seeing a picture, because we still have a lot of great pictures. And she brought us up with a lot of religious practices. So then to follow those kept it not missing her as much. So that was helpful. But I still had the desire to still call to ask the question. So it's just letting go and realize that they're in a better place. It's not about me. Let's focus on her. And I think that was the hardest part, was just letting go and let the work or the process of the work begin for the healing.
Cool. Okay, so Jason, what you wanted to talk about is realizing in retrospect that you and your family could have helped one another with the grief, and that you stayed locked in the misery of the grief all by yourself a long time. And now that you have hindsight, you're frustrated that you didn't reach out more and that you didn't help the family grieve together. So talk more about that idea of realizing later that social support probably would have been a good idea.
Yeah, in the moment, I mean, no one, typical Latin family, terrible with emotion, no, and especially on my mother's side, very bad with talking about difficult things. So when he passed, we, of course, there's these two breakings that happen. You have the individual who breaks, and then you have the family unit that breaks, because the family unit, I was only 19, my sister was 17. We were still like living together, family unit at the time. So that is forever changed and broken when that happens. So we are all three of us just kind of went into our own little grief bubble without really connecting with each other. And then I was just 6-7 months from moving out and going to UC Davis for college and starting a whole new life. And my sister, after a couple years, got married and started her life. And so they've been moving around a lot. So we never, not just as an individual, on an individual level, grieved properly for ourselves for the loss that we had as an individual, whether it's a father or husband. But we never did that together. And so there was a long, very long period of time where I didn't like contacting my mother. I didn't like going back to that house without ever really knowing why. It was Redding, California. I just figured I hate Redding, so I don't want to go back there. But it was just the memory of how that unit broke and never came back together. By not grieving together, we couldn't heal together and become that new family unit. So we just stayed broken and apart and separated for far too long. So knowing that now, like working on those relationships and building them back up and being more open and honest with each other, and that's going very well. But there's little anger, a lot of regret, a lot of feeling bad, because there were just long periods of time where I didn't contact my mother as much as I should have or would have, because it was just too painful without realizing why it was painful, and just stayed away from it. So there's a lot of regret there. Like I wish we had been people who would grieve together, or at least had like that network to show us how to do that properly. So that we could actually come together again earlier than it took. It was, I mean, I'm 43 now, I was 19. So basically then to just a couple years ago was that window of just like not truly connecting with the family I had left.
So have you guys been able to talk about that and share your experiences now?
Yeah, my mother and I have done a lot of that, and there's been a lot of like good moments with each other, and that has been very healing. Our relationship just as individuals, as me as an adult, her as an adult, interacting in that way, has been able to fully blossom and become a thing where that should have happened, years ago. So we were all just very stunted. I'm still working with my sister. She's in Indiana, so we don't get to actually be face to face a whole bunch. But yeah, something still working on there and opening up and just kind of, it's been very helpful and it's been very healing, I think, in the long run for all parties.
Awesome. So Sarah, let's talk about that. So when your dad died, how did your family do? Did you have a go into your separate corners family, or did you have a come together and grieve together family?
That part is hard because my brothers aren't really, I don't know, like it, I guess that's what kind of made me angry too, is the way that everybody kind of like dealt with it. Like for me, because like I said, we were the ones that like found him and whatever. So that grief, but my brothers weren't really, we don't really talk about it. Yeah, we don't, my family doesn't really talk about losing him, which kind of upset me because it's like, I guess for me, because I feel like they're kind of over it or something. And then that makes me mad at myself because I'm like stuck in this disbelief still. Like it can't be real. How can it be gone? I wish my family would like, we could like talk about it, but yeah, it's not something that we really talk about. So it's hard, but yeah.
It's hard. It is hard. So my family has been much like yours, Sarah. We didn't exactly have huggy feely parents, so we didn't have much modeling for how to process the hard stuff. My family in Louisiana was really good at it. They very much normalize death as part of the process, and they sit with people. No one ever dies in a hospital alone, for example. There's always people around them, preferably at home, but there's always people around them. And they're just really good with that. But my family, I discovered, is awesome in crisis. So we may not stay deeply in touch with each other over time. My one brother that lives in Reno, I see all the time because I was 13 when he was born. So he feels more like my kid. And he really stepped up. Like the first Christmas after my husband died, he and his family planned a trip to San Diego and invited me to go with them. And they checked on me and made sure I was okay. And my brother came down once a month for a while and helped me work on my house, and then once a quarter, and then taught me how to look on YouTube. So he'll answer questions. And if he's here, he kind of cruises around and sees what needs to be fixed. My sister was just amazing, answered my phone calls as soon as I called, when typically we like text. I'm busy, I'll call you back sometime this year. But she always answered the phone. She walked through it with me, let me be as upset as I needed to be. And even my brother, where that's really not his superpower, he tried his very best. So, and then same thing when my mom died, we all kind of rallied around, and my brother died the same day as your dad. And they came, they visited, they were with him, they took turns, they made sure that at the end, he knew he was part of a family and was very loved. And so that's been great. I, on the other hand, had a really hard time reaching out. Like Jason, looking back, knowing more social support would have made it go easier, would have lessened the experience of being alone in it. But I did do the Widowed Persons Association of California, and that was cool. But I know that if my family lived closer, like if I was in Louisiana and surrounded by all those huggy feely people, it would have made a huge difference. But you know, isolation has always been an indoor sport for me. So that wouldn't be what you would describe as my superpower. How about you, Lauren? So how did your family, is your family a family that can talk about the pain of death, or do they kind of want to quote scripture and move on?
But I think it was a combination of both, because you really need both outlets. I mean, because everybody processed differently. And that was the thing I think I found. I have uh, uh, she always made me call her big sister, not my older sister, but my big sister. And then I had my little sister as well. And just the sensitivity of just realizing their concerns and their needs were different than say mine. Uh, it's funny, my mom had she had a total different relationship with the boys versus what she had with the girls. And so now when I reflect back on what she's experiencing, because she's still being challenged, especially with the recent loss of her best friend, my sister as well. But just staying grounded, not going back to letting the negativity take effect. Like all of the bad things, they come to mind easier rather than trying to remember the good times. And in doing so, that's what helps lift each other up. That's why I'm so excited about what you offer here. It's that experience of a wide variety to help focus on our individual needs. It's so broad, but yet we lack a lot of times that empathy that's needed at the time. Not sympathy, but empathy as to how we're processing. So
What were your outlets for, like, when your mom died? What social support did you access specifically, or who was most helpful to you and your family in sort of talking through what you were going through?
that's a great question. Oh, surprisingly, it was my children. They knew the closeness that I have with my mom, and the support that I got from them encouraged me. It reminded me of how we don't realize it, but we're modeling to them how we should be reacting. So even the sadness or the loss, they feel it as much as you do. And then that's almost company, because they'll soothe you with, hey, I could only imagine. I know what you mean to me. And that kind of brings you back into perspective of just staying grounded. And I like modeling for the children. It allows me to uh, focus really on their needs. And again, what happens a lot of time, what we experience once again, when we help others, we're helping ourselves. So.
Okay. So that's a good segue into your topic. So Lawrence kind of wants to talk about the long game. So those of us that have been at this grieving thing a long time know the pain never goes away. Will never not be painful that my husband's gone. But gradually there starts to be room for something else. And then I start to be able to have a little joy again, a little laughter and a little fun. And eventually you evolve around to where you can see yourself as someone that's creating a life that has meaning. So Sara is pretty new in that. And also when the grieving process really stays intense the way it has for you, Sara, that's what therapists are for. So you should come see me. And but so it's really, and the early pain and the early agony, especially given that you just had another loss, that sense of, oh, someday you're like, oh, because you're so really drowning in the pain, and it would be plasticky to say, no, I'm just doing so great and moving on and it's all good. But over time, we notice that the pain does make us wiser and it makes us more resilient. Like if I could survive that, I could survive anything. And in my case, I would have told you before my husband died that I was a great grief counselor, but it was only after my husband died and I crashed and burned and then sort of came out into the light at the end of the tunnel. Now I'm a great grief counselor. So let's just talk about that. Lawrence had mentioned helping people know what stage they're in. So we've learned that Kubler-Ross's book wasn't written for survivors. It was written for people who are dying. So of course, people who are dying can reach acceptance because it's kind of a toggle switch, sure they're dying or you're not, right? So when you get to the point where you're like, oh, seriously, I'm dying, then you can stop fighting against that and begin to step into, so what do I want to do with the time I have left? But for the rest of us, that idea that there's this linear process, like that just doesn't happen. You can go in and out of anger 427 times. You can have hope for 5 minutes and then go back into denial. Like every year when my body starts telling me that if I managed my budget better in 1973, that my husband wouldn't have been under so much stress and wouldn't have had a heart attack. That's not a really rational part of my brain. So let's talk about that, Lauren. So you in the long haul, you've sort of arrived in the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's very hard not to slap platitudes on people and say those things that are so hurtful at funerals, like, well, we know they're in a better place. They were in a fine place with me. So how do you help people normalize, like, yeah, but it makes sense that you're feeling like this at this stage of your grief? That would make sense. But without saying, oh, you're in the progress box and now you're in this box, but of course you feel this way. Everyone grieves and everyone feels these things. It's okay that you feel these things. So talk about that, Lawrence, the long game now.
Right. I think what it is maybe helping them see that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, that there is hope. It's one day at a time. It's kind of preparing for that because everyone's looking for relief as quickly as possible. And in doing so, there's ways of doing that, but there's small steps. And again, that's why it's so important to have the recognition, our building the trust. It's like any type of new relationship that you're going into. The sudden loss, you're trying to fill that space, so you're not very open. And it's reestablishing that attempt to be open, to be vulnerable to a certain degree, but yet trying to get the help that's needed. And it's really not until we talk to others. We're trying to process this by ourselves. It's almost impossible. So and we could laugh at that, but it helps us better understand that it's okay to talk. We're in a world now that it's not as easy to talk to people. And it does require you to have trust. But that trust is built on an empathy that they can feel that you're really sincere. So in that process of getting people to open up, sometimes it's just the little baby steps. And then you're able to talk about other things, to even discuss how you feeling today. How'd you wake up this morning? What were your thoughts? So it's getting that opportunity to break down that barrier that we might have built up just from not trusting. And we're in a world that it's very challenging to try to lower those, to not be as guarded on our own feelings, where this is the most important time to get those things out, because that's part of the healing process too as well. So
True. That's great. That's awesome. So Jason, talk about the long game experience for you, turning eventually as you evolve from absolute horrible to some wisdom starts to show up and sprout, and then stop feeling that wisdom, but rather, I can feel this with you, bring it on. Let's do this together.
Yeah, my journey was both interesting and uninteresting in that there was a large chunk of time there where I didn't do the reaching out. I didn't do any of those things. And I stayed in my little, I mean, like I said before, I went months before I even cried for the first time. And even then, I went off to college and I had a new life to start and school. I had all the things to distract me. And I am quick enough and intelligent enough to coast by and without having to try too hard and like delve too hard into difficult things. So I spent a good chunk of my young adulthood just doing that and not really truly connecting, even with friendships and other people in my life, like friendly, cordial, all the things. I've always had a good ear and listened to people, but like me opening up and allowing them in to share in that experience was never something I was good at. And that's only something that I've started to do within the past, say, 5 years or so. So there was that. I laughed earlier before when you said, you know, opening up and sharing the experiences. I laugh because that was just not what I did for a long time. And I can see, like in hindsight, like how that was not beneficial for me and how that stunted me, if not hurt me, at the very least stunted me from being able to process and move on and build truly meaningful relationships with the people around me, which I feel like in a lot of ways I'm just now really diving into that, which I'm sad for myself for, but that was the journey and that's where I am now. So my long journey was a lot of nothing happening, with little bits of wisdom creeping in here and there, but never fully making all those connections because I was trying to do it by myself. And it wasn't until I started actually opening up and allowing other people in that I started to then explore those older relationships, like with my mother and everyone, and going to therapy and working on letting myself feel all those things in a way that I never allowed myself to before. So in a lot of ways, that process is still happening. And I don't know if it ever stops, but that first like real like opening up and doing something like this was not something I ever would have done before. Like, I don't know any of you. Why am I telling you any of my story? So yeah, it's been a lot of nothing happening, but a lot of roughness in that, just because there was a lot of nothing happening, and a lot of development not happening emotionally, at the very least. So that was my journey, a long haul journey, and then now I'm in the process, and now it's going much better.
That's awesome. So Sara, you're so early in your grief when people talk about, oh, there's this fairyland where you're gonna learn wisdom, and right now you're just in the agony of the earlier grief and the regrets. And so how do you react to all this talk about a long game and who you're gonna be in 5 years when you get through the worst of this pain?
I don't know. I think that's like the whole like getting through it and all that stuff is where I kind of like struggle because it's gonna be 2 years on Halloween for my dad. And I struggle with that part because I feel like I'm already supposed to be like further than I am right now, if that makes sense. Like, because where I'm at in the process of it, I guess. Like, for instance, when I lost my mom in 2009, and so it's going to be 16 years on September 29th. And I never dealt with her passing. I kind of just turned towards other stuff to deal with it. So I don't know, like like I know there's like I don't know how to explain it. Like I know there's another side. Like eventually I'll get to that other side, like with the grief. But I think kind of right now I'm just like I'm confused. If that I don't know. Like I'm just yeah,
So
I'm just
you
confused.
hear rumors about people getting farther along with their grief, but they're just rumors to you. And just know, people tell you the silliest things about the timeline, but most of the people I know will tell you the second year is actually worse than the first year. Sort of like the first year kind of in a fog, and the second year you start to wake up, and the second year is typically a lot more painful than the second year. So if you're feeling like your pain is more intense, again, you're doing this horrible thing just right. And then everyone's grief is everyone's grief. And when we try to hold ourselves to someone else's standard, it's so mean. And so it breaks my heart that you don't have a lot of people around you who say, let's just talk about how much you must have loved your dad, that you feel this kind of agony because he's gone. Because it is, we don't miss people. So my parents were messy, and I didn't have good relationships with them, and I don't miss them. I feel guilty about being someone who doesn't miss their parents, but my dad really didn't have much to do with us after we moved out of the house. And so it's hard to miss someone that acts like you're a bother. And then my mom was so much work that my first reaction was, oh, good, her suffering is over. So is mine. But she wasn't that mom that you talk to about your life. She wasn't that mom who does all those Kodak commercial things. And so when other people hit, Hallmark events, my mom was nowhere in that. My mom was not in that. My mom was not in that. My mom was not in that. So the grief is that I did them all without her before she died. And then that didn't change after. So for you, though, if you were engaged and involved, and now this person that you care about is gone, I hope that you can just honor your grief and give it as much time as you need. You notice I'm coming up on 10 years and I'm over here crying. And so it's okay that it would be horrible if you didn't miss them. So
for myself, kind of piggybacking on that with the comment you said earlier, I went 17, 18 years not really processing fully any of it. So don't put a timetable on anything. Like don't go as long as I did.
So it looks like you're in it, Sara, and that's awesome. You're doing your grief. It's just hard. It's the hardest thing that anyone can ever do. And then people will keep leaving. It's not like you had this one grief to deal with. Now you've had new losses to deal with. This is so much. So does anyone have anything else to add about their grief process and maybe something we learned from each other here?
I just really, again, I value this opportunity that we're able collectively to let others know out there in the world they're not alone. And I think that's the biggest, if you want to call it a struggle, I'll say a challenge that we deal with, is accepting that it's okay to reach out just to start the process of starting something new, because that's what it's all about. Either we're going to fall back into what we did before and miss it, or accept the adventure of the new journey that's ahead, and it's with new people. So it takes us maybe kind of letting go of that uh, the old me and look forward to the new me. And maybe that's where hope's coming in again. And that's
Eventually.
something we lost.
But when you're in early grief, that idea of an adventure is just,
Wow. Yeah.
it's like, don't call it an adventure. Like they say, this is the club that nobody would ever volunteer to join. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to belong to this club. So yeah, so it's so awesome. You guys are in such very different stages of the grief process and have handled it different ways and have families that handle it different ways. So it's just important for everyone to know grief sucks. Nothing will ever change that. There's no fast forward button. It just sucks. And so let's go to the 1 minute wisdoms. So if you wanted someone, like, for example, Sara, who's still in the agony stage of the grief, if you wanted to throw them one little bitty lifeline, what would be the teeny tiny little lifeline that you might offer people to just make it okay for them to be at the point where you are in your grief?
I mean, for me, it's reach out to the people around you, let them see what you're going through, and allow them to be there as a part of it. That was something I definitely needed. That was something that I think we've confirmed for myself here in this panel that I've heard, especially through Lawrence and his experience. And as with Lawrence, if you have brothers and sisters and they're not really helping out, like if you have children, like just like Lawrence's kids helped him, like reach out to those you can reach out to and you can be real with.
Yeah. I mean, it's neat, Lawrence, that your kids were such a resource for you. I feel like my pain kind of is something my children have to hold. So I try to do more of my grieving somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Lawrence, what is your 1 minute wisdom? Thank you, Jason.
I have been surprised when a thought came to me, and I love sharing it, of how negativity is a waste of energy. We're in the process of trying to heal. We don't know how. And those that are kind of looking forward to maybe experiencing that one day, that's like to get the joy back, to get your happiness back. We have the authority to actually request this and pursue it. What we find is the support of others around us gives us that little push we need to go to the next step, to not be afraid. So again, just the negative thoughts that we're bombarded with constantly. In fact, I think there was a fact that we have 60,000 negative thoughts in one day. And just to think of the effort that it takes to try to repel half of it is what brought us to where we are today. So I just want to encourage to keep trying to reach out. Don't give up on ourselves, because the enemy is going to try to do that if it's no more than in our mind. And like I said, we're in a very challenging time right now, where hope is something to look forward to. That we can wake up with joy, and I think that's what it takes us to one day at a time.
The one day at a time is definitely, fortunately, you only have to tolerate one horrible day at a time.
Right.
I told someone each day feels like a year, and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
it's been 9 years.
Mm.
Yeah. So, Sara, what would be your 1 minute life preserver that you could throw to someone who's clinging to the blown up ship?
I guess just what I'm learning now is don't reach out. Don't isolate, because I've been doing that and it's not working, but just don't isolate, reach out to people that care about you. And just don't shut down. Just allow yourself to feel like what you're feeling, whether it's like anger or yeah, just allow yourself to let it out and not hold it in or isolate.
Yeah, that's great. So I went to the Widowed Persons Association of California meetings, and it was very helpful. But I had two versions of me that attended those meetings. There was when I would hear people say stuff and it would be like, oh yeah, that's exactly, oh yeah. So it was like, oh, it's okay that I'm like that. It's okay that I'm like that. But then the therapist, grumpy, critical voice in me would say, well, you already knew that. Why didn't you just do that for yourself? Why did you have to hear someone tell you that? I mean, I was so mean to myself. Like I couldn't just receive the gift of knowing that I was like the people in the room. I had to just beat myself up. Not, it was, I mean, some of us make this much harder than it is. And it's already so horribly hard. So the one thing, Sarah, is the most dangerous thing in the world is one of us self-haters alone in a room. So if for no other reason than to just hear some other voices besides our own, you're absolutely right, reaching out. And I didn't want to. It was really hard for me. I'd often show up late, sneak in the back and sneak out early. It was just really hard for me. So like Lauren said, to try to start to trust people were safe to do this with and that they actually cared. And they were all very nice and open and inviting. And whenever I showed up, I got the very same open, loving greeting. If I told the very same story 3 weeks in a row, I got the very same loving greeting. They just knew I just needed to do what I needed to do. And it was just lovely. And I went for a long time until I moved to the other side of town, and it was just a good excuse to stop going. But so thank you all so very much. I am very honored that you trusted me to walk you through this scary and potentially deadly experience. And I'm just going to turn off the recording now, and thank you very much.
You.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, really.